there has been an agreement for the release of all the hostages in exchange for 3 militants.
How many?
3.
Who are these three?
The 1999 Kandahar hijack is something that I had become obsessed with because I went through a phase of binging on flight complication videos. Essentially cases where disasters have occurred in the aviation sector across the world. And these videos are sometimes more engaging than actually sponsored shows on streaming platforms, all told through a voiceover and visuals of a flight simulator. This in turn opened a wormhole for me to explore several hijacking instances that have happened with Indian flights, something that was especially rampant in the 80s and 90s, some attributed to militancy in Punjab, some to extremist forces in Jammu and Kashmir, and in one case, hear this out. In 1993, executed by college students from Lucknow demanding for a change in college courses, an award to be taken away from a professor, and more importantly, of course, a postponement of exams. Such was the lack of security measures in a pre-9/11 world where every 2 to 4 years or so, there would be an incident of a hijacking and an announcement of bizarre demands. The 1999 IC-814 hijacking is however vivid in my parents' memory, who were getting daily updates on the news. I first remember knowing about the case through a Nat Geo documentary that is also available on YouTube and brilliantly details the events that followed. There is a lot of noise floating around regarding this series, the supposed empathetic portrayal of the terrorists who hijacked the plane, and accusations on the makers to primarily focus on the incompetence of the then NDA government. I want to lay down everything for you regarding what I felt about this 6-episode series that dropped on Netflix last weekend, and whether the controversy surrounding it is just noise or actually warranted. The series focuses on the flight from Kathmandu to Delhi that got hijacked by terrorists and the series of events that transpired as the plane travelled from Amritsar to Lahore to Dubai and to finally Kandahar, the den of the Taliban in Afghanistan, where there were negotiations held with the Indian government. The series is based on the book Flight into Fear written by Captain Devi Sharan, who was responsible for flying IC-814, and Srinjoy Chaudhary. The torture endured by the passengers in the more than 7-day ordeal forms the basic premise of this series, directed by Anubhav Sinha, a director who has had the most interesting career, by the way. Who thought that the same man who made movies like Cash and Tum Bin would actually be making movies like Mulk, Article 15 and Thappad? While I was the most intrigued on how Anubhav Sinha has made use of the stellar Avengers-like ensemble cast, I wanted to especially see whether his politics does not take over the storytelling. Sometimes Sinha falls prey to this trap, something that I definitely felt with a film like Anek. So let's get to breaking down what worked and did not really sit right with me regarding this series. The cast. It's an absolute treat for cinephiles and those who are obsessed with actors and their work to see such a talented ensemble get together. What's also special about the show is that the screen time for actors is quite dispersed, so one can't necessarily pinpoint at someone playing the lead in this series. As the series can't use official names for legal reasons, everyone is playing a version of the real politicians or intelligence officers. Those who know what went down in history would exactly know the people they are portraying. In that regard, Pankaj Kapoor is solid as the External Affairs Minister, actually wanting steadfast action and being the only voice of empathy and concern while surrounded by officials who mostly want to pass on any individual responsibility. Naseeruddin Shah will infuriate you in this series, mostly managing optics and who will be put under the bus in this scenario, a sign of an actor exactly knowing the assignment. Arvind Swamy and Kumud Mishra lent great support, but I felt Manoj Pava was a standout in this ensemble cast, sporadically throwing truth bombs equating the ISI, Taliban and Afghanistan to be the same kind, and hating the judicial process of keeping such dreadful terrorists who are demanded in exchange for passengers in jails, essentially wanting them to be dead instead. Dia Mirza and Amrita Puri dealing with the news cycle are commendable, but what I especially appreciated was the restraint shown by Vijay Varma, Patra Lekha and Aditi Gupta, the captain flying the plane and the air hostesses, who while panicking internally have to show a level of calmness and leadership with the fiasco happening around them. This can be challenging as a performer because you put forth a stern face externally but have several hypotheticals running in your head. I think from a performance point of view, the cast has absolutely killed it. However, I must say, it's not entirely true for the portrayal of the terrorists, something that I will speak about a little later in this review. Jarring color grading and side quest. I don't know why, but the color grading of the show, especially portions of Kathmandu and Delhi, irritated me. Kathmandu is presented with a blue hue that will give competition to Kate Beckinsale's Underworld and the new Blade Runner. In contrast, a blown, whitewashed image is utilized for portions in Delhi, which almost seems like you stretch the brightness for your Instagram post. I'm all for stories essentially setting a mood with their cinematography, but the portions in Nepal, which are mostly executed at night with the sharp color grading, almost makes it tough to decipher what is happening. The attempt by the makers is also to present sequences of Nepal and the intel provided by Anupam Tripathi to have been vital for this case. Had it been taken more seriously, probably the events would have not transpired the way they did. But the role of the raw agent as the episodes continue almost become like irrelevant side quests, not really engaging you as a viewer. Torture sequences in exchange for information keep on going on, developing little curiosity from you as a viewer. Frustrating bureaucracy. Let's be honest. This was a systematic failure from the government's point of view. From an administrative and intelligence point of view, it has to be called out and criticized. A lot of the criticism for the series is warranted, and I'll dwell on that further in the next point. But also, a lot of the heat the series is getting is because it's critical of the NDA government then. A lot of the heat is projection and nitpicking also because the leaders of the BJP were in positions of power then. The next window attitude in this series is shocking. The next window attitude is the government babu attitude when you go for inquiries and they tell you to go somewhere else. It's rampant throughout the series. This kind of attitude really frustrates you as a viewer because lives are at stake. And government officials are having random conversations over chai. The complacency and the delay in executive decisions is one of the major reasons for such a catastrophe to happen in the first place. Everyone thinks about how the hell did the hijacking not get stopped in Amritsar when the commandos were available and on the ground. And as you see the series, you will pull your hair in frustration when it is revealed the petty nature of why the government and the intelligence agents did not act while the plane was on Indian soil. Every time the government is called to take a decision, excuses of being in a coalition government and needing permissions is flung. Pankaj Kapoor categorically asks, Logo ka kya? No one wants to take onus of the situation, and this further delays any action, causing for things to go absolutely out of hand, and a trickle effect of violence later, causing for history to look at the decisions of the then government regarding this hijacking not so kindly. Portrayal of terrorists. This has been the biggest criticism regarding the series, that these dreaded individuals who I can equate to being nothing but monsters and savages who don't deserve an ounce of sympathy from me to be kind individuals who did not want to cause harm to the passengers as they only focused on their ultimate goal. The show has this odd tendency to show moments of empathy and savagery of the terrorists almost side by side, making me wonder what exactly was the motive. The terrorists would call for a doctor for someone that they have themselves stabbed. Am I supposed to feel empathy for the same? In Dubai, women and children deboarded the plane, not because of the magnanimity of the hijackers, but due to the diplomacy of the USA with Dubai. There's this odd tone of trying to portray them to be good Muslims as they provide food to passengers when they are in Kandahar. But they're literally beating up passengers incessantly, throwing a dead body with no shame, leaving them in inhumane conditions as days pass by and the toilets overflow. And you want me to have a sense of emotional connection with the hospitality they are showcasing? It's this weird back and forth between kindness and savagery that didn't sit right with me. On the other hand, none of the terrorists, especially Rajiv Thakur, developed an ounce of fear within me. They actually seemed incompetent and confused, making me reminisce about how Jim Sarb absolutely killed it in Nirja, being genuinely terrifying. The code names most people are bringing up that were utilized by the terrorists, namely Burger, Shankar and Bhola, have been acknowledged by the Ministry of External Affairs officially and was mentioned in the documentary that released more than a decade ago. This narrative that Anubhav Sinha was trying to hide the religious identity of the terrorists is false, as they are literally talking about Islam and what it means to be a Muslim throughout the series. The code name utilized to hide their identity is factual and in no way is an attempt to even remotely give you an idea that these are Hindus. These are terrorists who are Muslims, and it's very clear in the series. If the attempt by the makers, however, was to showcase that they had a heart and are just blinded by extremism, I'm sorry, but I did not have an ounce of empathy for their actions. The series leaves you with conflicting feelings, making you wonder, is there really a right answer when we look back at this chapter of history? What about the army and their sacrifices for this nation when we trade these dreaded terrorists and leave them scot-free to cause havoc in the world again? But what about innocent civilians and kids? Can we just leave them to die? Who will be responsible for the violence caused by these men in the events that followed post-1999? We got our citizens back, but at what cost?